Hey everybody, it's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we look back at the previous week in football, soccer, I suppose this week you've got to say calcio as well, and tackle the things that we thought were interesting. I'm Tom Rennie of TalkSport and Sirius XM fame, sorts. Alongside me is an actual celebrity. You know him as Sugar Ray from the 90s, but also as a top player in MLS, and indeed top broadcaster these days for Apple, and you name it, he works for them. It is Mr. Brian Dunny Dunseth. How are you, mate? You all right?
Rennie, I'm fantastic. It was great to see you with Mr. Joe Cummings, getting that WhatsApp, getting to see one of my best friends. He said there was 12 people around you. He had to surf through the crowd at Craven Cottage to get to you to say hello. And then you guys sent me a selfie. I didn't know if I was happy or sad or jealous or insecure or envious, but all of those things ran through my body in the morning in which I was preparing for LA Galaxy at home against San Jose to wrap up the MLS weekend on Sunday evening, afternoon, something like that. But the Galaxy are back, my man. I know we probably will touch a little MLS, but we got a little bit of a street fight happening right now in Southern California. We had the Cali Clasico, which was important between San Jose and LA historically. But now that LAFC are in the neighborhood, El Tráfico has a different meaning, and it's interesting. You've got the LA sector, which is LAFC, and you've kind of got the Beach Inland Empire sector, which is the LA Galaxy. But Gabriel Peck, Ricky Puig, Joseph Paintsil, Dejan Joveljic right now, you've got a really fun attacking team in the Galaxy and really stamping their flag back in the ground for what used to be a very David Beckham-esque dominated LA Galaxy historically.
Well, we need that derby, don't we? I mean, as we've seen in England as well, when local rivals are both good at the same time, there's a lot more prestige to it, excitement to it. We love that sort of thing. And it's sort of like, I was thinking about this in terms of sort of the Premier League. When Everton are good, it's great if Liverpool are good. When United are good, it's good that City are good. When Arsenal are good, it was great when Chelsea were also good. And we sort of had LA Galaxy.
You're missing somebody.
Who?
You're missing somebody.
Who?
Like when Crystal Palace smashes West Ham. Talk about a proper London derby.
That's true. It's difficult for Crystal Palace to understand, though, because we were in what's known as European football, and we won a trophy, a top-level trophy.
The artist formerly known as?
Yes, but you say that, but Palace don't understand that. So they won't. So we played like 15 more games than them and played a huge game against the champions of Germany on the Thursday, whereas they, of course, were scratching their asses doing all like they always do. Good luck finishing 12th, losers. Sorry, Tim. Listen, I want to get into that later in the program. And we've got heroes and villains later as well. So maybe Daniel picks some MLS heroes and villains. I did want to start, though, Danny, by talking about the FA Cup. Because when I was with your friend Joe at Craven Cottage this weekend, I've got to tell you this. My luck is so out right now when it comes to going to games. And they said, what FA Cup semi do you want to do live? So I did the commentary of City-Chelsea on the Saturday. And that was my choice to do that as opposed to Man U Coventry, because I was like, well, even though this is a pretty rubbish average Man U, it's not going to be much of a game here. So I chose that one. Then on the Sunday, I was going to just go to a game to watch it. And I basically was like, do you want to go to Liverpool-Fulham, which was just the deadest of dead rubbers? So dead by the end, most people in the press tribune were watching their laptops, watching the FA Cup semi-final penalties in extra time as opposed to the game in front of us. But I chose going there over the FA Cup semi-final. So don't follow my tips at the moment, is what I'm saying. But talk to us a bit about this, Dunny, this FA Cup semi-final, because Eric Ten Hag's been speaking today. We're recording on Tuesday. And he has said the reaction from the pundit class, you and me and all the people on the telly, and, it's Eric Ten Hag's going to get sacked after this. There was someone in the Telegraph who referred to it as something like the most embarrassing victory of all time, or words to that effect. He said the reaction from the pundit class has been embarrassing and a disgrace. Football's about results, says Eric Ten Hag. We made it to the final and we deserved it. Okay, we lost control for 20 minutes and in the end we're a bit lucky, but we made it to the final and that is a huge achievement. What do you make to that? And have the pundit class gone too far? Because they did win.
I turned it off. I turned the game off. I landed in Los Angeles. I was watching on the plane. I was watching on my lift to the Bellamar down in Manhattan Beach. I was meeting up with Marcelo Balboa U.S. men's national team legend, and JP Navarro, who are mis compadres on the Spanish side for Apple TV. And we were walking down to Uncle Bill's to have breakfast down on Manhattan Beach. For those that know Uncle Bill's, Specta.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I turned it off. I was so angry. I was so frustrated. I was just flabbergasted at the lack of control. I'm not trying to be bombastic. I'm not trying to be out of control. I'm just telling you, as a fan's perspective, the entirety of this year has been summed up once again by the way that Manchester United was up 3-0 against Coventry City in an FA Cup semifinal and completely lost control. And this whole idea of substitution patterns and moaning about injuries, and then when he takes players off, how can you moan about the injuries? Because he's thinking about the players' safety and health and the fatigue factor and all of this. Look at the names on the back of the jerseys. Look at the names on the back of the jerseys that were in that game. To lose control in the manner in which they did is once again the perfect visual marker, visual explanation, the the amount of mental anguish that myself and the amount of text messages I was getting from Manchester. As soon as the third goal went in, I shut it down. I turned it off.
How cocky were you at 3-0 up, though? Tell us about that.
No, I wasn't cocky at all, because here's the thing. There's nothing to be cocky about. This is a game that they should have won. This is a game that there was no excuses not to win. And I mean this with all due respect to Coventry City, to their manager, to their fan base. An extraordinary team performance in the second half. Haji Wright, Stones, all of those things. Like, credit where credit's due. You can't turn up. You can't play a game and think that it's a God-given right just to win. So again, credit where credit's due. But I've had enough. I've had it. Like, I just don't. It's not fun watching. It's not fun watching. There's zero inspiration. Like, watching this team capitulate over and over and over, it's not fun anymore. It's not. So I turned it off. And the only part I turned it on
to differ.
No, I mean, for the neutrals, it's great. For anybody that's not a Manchester United fan, great. But for me, from the walk from the hotel to when we sat down for our 20-minute wait to get in for breakfast, that's when I started getting text messages again. I stopped responding to text messages. Smart. And then they're like, oh my God, I can't believe we have to go to penalties. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll go in, I'll watch this. And I watched the penalties. And you know what I did? I watched the penalties. Rasmus Højlund scored. I turned it back off. I was so indifferent. Like, okay, great. Like, to the point where the second half, this is how flustered I was. Lose it. Just lose it. Put us out of our misery. Don't even go to the final. You're just going to get destroyed in the final against Man City anyways. Just lose it. Give Ratcliffe and his group another excuse as to why to go with a different manager. Because I knew what was going to happen in the postgame. There was going to be not a single thread of honesty that should have said that second half was an abomination, that second half was embarrassing, that the total loss of control, once again, comes down to individual performance, collective performance, managerial decision-making, and a lack of a game model that has any semblance of control defensively. And again, 40-second back four, blah, blah, blah. I would gently remind everybody, what the flying squirrel is anybody doing with the training module that leads to an existence of a need to have 42 different back four combinations? What since you've been out of Champions League since December? What have you been doing? I mean, the lack of thinking about midweek games, and I know the FA Cup's been a conversation, but like, what's happening behind the scenes that you're losing all of these players? So, yeah, listen, are there excuses? Yes. Can we theoretically and tangibly say making it to a final is an achievement? Absolutely. But the way you got to that final, it's luck. It's not skill. It's luck. It's a penalty shootout. Because
Coventry were also very good, though. I mean, we have lost how. I mean,
the first half very good.
A redemption moment at Wembley after Luton last year. A lot of these guys, it was an all-is-lost moment at 3-0. I mean, you would have been involved in games where the opposition were way better than you, that you were like, right, screw it, it's now or never. And that did happen. And, that's not necessarily Eric Ten Hag and Man United's fault. And, Casemiro runs like he's got a trailer on his back, but, it's not his fault so much, is it?
So let me ask you this. When Mark Robbins, by the way, I think Mark Robbins made a mistake in the manner in which he set his team up to play in the beginning, but I understand, because if you allow yourself to actually play your game model, there's going to be the idea that the strength of Manchester United is what? Win the ball deep, transition, play through an early line, and then dump a ball into a channel. That is what Manchester United is best at, right? Utilizing the channels in behind. Okay, I understand that. Keep the game in front of you. Game goes sideways. You've given up a bunch of early goals. And in a less than ideal world, that the second goal, 45th +1, is just an absolute stunner. Bruno, fantastic goal, 58th. But the adjustments made at the halftime break and the adjustments in the second half to actually go for it, to be less pragmatic, to show just a little bit more. You could say maybe Robbins didn't make the right decisions tactically in the first half, considering the way they started. And you could probably name 3 players, right? Garnacho, McTominay, Kobe Mainoo, or the 3 players that have consistently been really good performers throughout the entire season. The rest of them indifferent at times, super high, super low. But in a game like this, the frustration level for me in the second half is it's the arrogance of thinking that Manchester United can control any game. It's the arrogance of thinking that, okay, back pocket, this is a win, everything's under control, see the game out. How many games this season have you been in the 60th minute as a neutral, as a pundit, as an opposition fan, and said, oh, yeah, they're in complete control. They've got this, lock it up, shut it down. There's no way a team's going to overcome a 3-0 result.
The one they were 3-0 up against West Ham, that was pretty in control. That one good game of the season.
Yeah. Can you name another? Can you name another?
No, that one was good though.
Yeah, it was. It was great.
It was your cup final, and you won it.
Great,
You did well.
Great banter.
Listen, let me ask you. There's 3 things I want to ask you about from this game. There's loads of big moments, and I think you covered
really pissed me off.
I know. Let's talk about offside, because
hate it.
Look, it was tragic that goal was disallowed, right? It was a tragedy for football, for the FA Cup, a moment where the FA Cup maybe really needed that after the debacle of the previous week, where the Premier League and FA have come together seemingly without talking to the stakeholders at the EFL and the National League to get rid of replays. They've done it without talking to the body that puts the most clubs into it. So it's all a mess. And we can talk about that. We have spoken about that previously. What's next for the FA Cup? Is it right? Is it wrong to get rid of replays? But those that think you shouldn't get rid of it, Coventry City are in the EFL, who don't agree with the fact they were bypassed in conversation. So it would have been a big moment, considering as well, to get to the semi-final, Coventry needed a replay. I think 4th round against Sheffield Wednesday was a replay victory. So it would have been great for the narrative, for all of it, if they'd have won the game. Plus, the comeback, greatest comeback in FA Cup semi-final history, all of that. However, according to what we've all signed up to, he is offside.
Yeah,
and
it's factual.
I watched the game on Monday night in the Championship between Middlesbrough and Leeds United. Middlesbrough probably aren't going to make the playoffs, but still big game for them at home against the team trying to go top, outside chance, whatever. Leeds were trying to go top, and Crescencio Somerville, who's brilliant, by the way. If you've not seen much of him this season at Leeds, find some time to watch some Crescencio Somerville goals. They've been incredible. But I think it's Leeds second. They win 4-3 in the end. He has slipped through, and he is 3 feet offside. Like, it is not close, but the goal is given because the assistant referee hasn't seen it. These are both, in their ways, tragedies in terms of, the integrity of the game and what's right and wrong for the teams involved. But I still, Dunny, feel like, as awful as it was, and as painful as it was, and as much as I've enjoyed people showing super zooms of the line going above Aaron Wan-Bissaka's boot and thinking about ball pressure inside the ball when it's released and had he actually passed it or not, in the end, we signed up for, we'll make that decision for you, and our decision is offside. I thought the furore of the whole thing, and VAR is killing the game, that ridiculous, boring trope, I thought it was all too much, really. He was offside. It's a shame.
It is a shame he was offside because of the way that we are executing this law, and watching the semi-automated versus automated offside is going to be the debate with the technology and the frame per second and where we're at now and all of that, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, listen, it was a gut-wrenching moment. And unfortunately, this is something that I have to talk about in Major League Soccer pretty weekly, it feels like, is that, based on the camera angles, they can be misleading. And I know I saw a couple of reverse angles from fans inside the stadium that were shooting on their phones and saying, "Well, hold on, look at this angle." Well, that's not a true angle. You're very rarely going to get right on the line the exact moment where the players, from a camera angle, where the players are on and off. So, yeah, listen, gut wrenching. I don't know. I think we'll continue to see an evolution of the offside debate, with IFAB trying to verbalize what is or is not offside. Now, you know, uh, a shoulder lean, a half a body, all of these things. There's never going to be clarity unless you're going to say he has to be completely in an offside position, the entirety of his body to be offside. Because I've always, as a defender, it sucked, but I still always thought, give the benefit to the attacker, right? That's what it has always been, even pre VAR. Give the benefit of the play to the attacking player. So I don't know where we go. It's this whole cut his toenails. He's wearing boots, but still, his boot is in barely an offside position.
It's just such an irritating trope, I think, that has really been pushed by a lot of the pundit class. And it's all like, VAR's killing football. And then you take the calls. VAR's killing football. It's sucking the joy out of the game. And it's like, well, no, previously we had things that went right and went wrong. And the frustrating thing is they're not getting everything right. That is annoying. Just ask Nottingham Forest, which we're going to do next. But in the end, it was never perfect. It was never going to be perfect. I don't think it is sucking the joy out of the game. It's still the most viewed sport in the world, and 80,000 people turned up for Man U Coventry at the weekend. But it is annoying when things you want to happen don't happen. So that is frustrating. Listen, two other really brief bits. They're sort of FA Cup finally, but I just wanted to see what you thought about them. So the Anthony thing. When the penalty shootout is won and Anthony walks away and sort of cups his ear to the Coventry players. I wanted to see what you thought about that, because I've seen some Man U fans defend it as top-down Sethery. But the other bit about it, which developed on the Tuesday, so Neil Maupay, known as football's big wind-up, right? Everyone hates Neil Maupay. Neil Maupay, Brentford striker, quoted Match of the Day's video of Anthony doing it and said, just for the record, not even I would do this. Which I thought was excellent.
Yeah.
What? Just briefly, what did you make to the whole Anthony thing?
Yeah, I saw Man United fans trying to say that it was a response to Haji Wright after scoring his penalty, or I guess his second penalty, that he kind of put his hand to his ear. You
Wow, that was such a big pause. I could have driven 2 buses through that.
With the 2 seasons that Anthony has had at the club, to be a player that was on the field when this team completely lost control, to be a player that again and again and again just shows this really undesirable side of him, with the body language and the demonstrative motions. And then to do this when you literally slipped through to the semifinal, I didn't like it. You know me, I'm not a huge Harry fan, but talk about, the 2 different moments where Anthony turns and cups his ears and just comes off really horribly. And then Harry Maguire immediately takes his hands off the shoulders of his players and walks over instead of celebrating to shake their hands. I just thought you had 2 very, very different versions of what it should look like versus what it shouldn't look like. And again, I don't pretend to understand the verbal diarrhea that happened between players on the field. and the wind-ups that happened and the trash talking that happened. And this could have been something that had been built up, whether it was a tackle or a push or whatever. But I mean, you're up 3-0. You're pushed to extra time. You're pushed to the precipice of being knocked out against Coventry City, and that's who I think it just said a lot about him. And it's I was like, really, like that right there is what you're. I mean, go run to Hoyland, go run to Onana, go say thank fucking God we squeezed through. Sorry, Tim, but don't do that. I couldn't. I couldn't. Again, it was just one more reason why I had to shut the game off. I don't even know why I watched. I was so pissed anyways. And there wasn't even relief. It was just like, ugh. I just turned it off. I was okay, I gotta get on with my day. I'm done.
One final bit I wanted to mention. It's not really about the game so much. It's about something that happened post-game. And it was, again, I didn't go to this one because I made the decision to go to Fulham Liverpool. Again, well done, Tom. But there was a great video from my colleague at the Times, Gregor Robertson, former player, now really good journalist, does the Times podcast as well. And he posted this video, which was really grabbing, actually. He pans left, and it's the Man United fans all basically going home. They've gone home, their seats are all empty. It's about 10, 15 minutes after the full-time whistle, so it's not a cup final, you go home. It pans right to the Coventry City end, where there's near 40,000 fans still in sky blue shirts, colours everywhere, players on the pitch, a moment of incredible mutual appreciation. Now, it's not a comment on Man United fans leaving or whatever. It's a comment on how much clubs are desperate for success, how much clubs and their fans are desperate for something special, which, as you know, I won't wang on about it too much here, but, you know, I experienced my team winning a trophy for the first time in my life in Prague this summer. Calm down, Jasper. I know, it's a good point. And it's my dog seeing a bag in the window. Anyway, he's just seen Anthony outside. But shut up. Hey, I'm trying to do a podcast here. Thanks, mate. Some people. Anyway, I saw my team win a trophy, right, for the first time. And I was watching this video that Gregor Robertson posted. And I just thought, there's no room left now for the Carabao Cup, right? This is not the Carabao Cup, it was the FA Cup, but there's no room in the calendar for it with the expanded Champions League and Europa League. There is no place in the calendar for it. And Guardiola was somewhat disingenuously talking about playing too many games and, you know, my squad are so tired in the FA Cup game on the Saturday, blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, it's such great evidence for something I've always said. And certainly in recent years, my feeling has grown more for it. All the teams that qualify for Europe, get them out of the Carabao Cup, the League Cup, if you want the League Cup to exist. And if you do that, you've suddenly got a competition that Wolverhampton Wanderers can win, that Everton can win. You've suddenly got a competition that Leeds United or Coventry City or even dropping further down, Wrexham can win, right? Because you're in a competition that Manchester City aren't in. And in the end, we can't compete. The rest of us who support other clubs can't compete with Man City, Arsenal, the riches of these clubs, right? So would it have made it worse for this competition if Man City weren't in it? I don't think it would. I think what it would do, I don't think Coventry City fans, if they win the League Cup and they don't have Man City in it, would give a tinker's damn about the fact they never took on Manchester City. What they'd have this incredible day, they'd have a trophy. And people always say to me when I say this, they're like, oh, what about the sponsors? You can't get a top-line sponsor without Manchester City or Liverpool who win it without really caring about it. We won a trophy. Let's hope it's part of the Klopp-druple. No, you won a trophy, and that in itself is the thing, right? So what I'd really, really like to see is the European teams out of the Carabao Cup, a competition that different teams win, and moments like that for Coventry City fans. These clubs need more moments, more games they can win, more trophies they can win. It's why the Conference League has been such a great thing for so many clubs. Villa are in a European semi-final for the first time since the 1980s. First time in my lifetime it has happened. And do you think they care that Arsenal aren't in it? They don't give a toss. And just brief, I know we've got to move on, but
I think it's a brilliant. It's a brilliant idea. Take the teams, take the teams that are competing in Europe out of the Carabao Cup. Put the carrot of qualifying for Conference League by winning the Carabao Cup at the end of it, and then give some of these teams that would have never or potentially might have had a chance, but certainly probably never would have had a chance to qualify for the Carabao Cup and see how it all plays out. And then that way you've got something special. You've got something unique. You have something desirable. But I would agree with you. The one thing I did enjoy in that game was seeing the passion of the Coventry City fans. I loved the crowd shots. I and the idea that there was hope and just seeing like the hands and like the like holding the scarves and like the kids, like all of that, like seeing the women and the men crying of just the event itself, it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Let's encourage it. Right, let's move on to something we shouldn't encourage, and that is the owner of a club taking over the social media. I wanted to talk to you about this because this story broke. It's on my burner account. Oh no, wait, that's the official. So this broke as I was walking into Craven Cottage on Sunday, and you're with a bunch of journalists, but also fans outside. Everyone thought it was a joke. Like you've been catfished in some way. So Nottingham Forest against Everton this weekend. Look, they probably should have had 2, maybe 3 penalties. The handball against Ashley Young is like identical to the Wan-Bissaka one. They both should be or both shouldn't be. That's another conversation. At least one of the fouls, I think the one on Gio Reyna was the most foul, but I think they could all be penalties. But that's almost by the by now. That's unimportant. That's a conversation to be had, but not right here. Why? Because Nottingham Forest took to social media, and I can only assume, I don't know this, that either the owner himself or someone in senior management has spoken to the admin of the social media and said, post this. Either sent it direct and it's been posted verbatim, or sent a really strong gist and made sure this is in there. So here's what they wrote. 3 extremely poor decisions, 3 penalties not given, which we simply cannot accept. We warned the PGMOL that the VAR is a Luton fan before the game, and they didn't change him. Our patience has been tested multiple times. NFFC will now consider its options. Spoiler alert, you haven't got any fucking options. Sorry, Tim. What did you make to this, Dunny, when you first saw it? And what did you make to the fact the following day, they didn't back down, they doubled down with an even longer statement?
Well, listen, they've certainly been on the wrong end of a couple different decisions that have cost them some significant points. And then when you add the complexity of the points deduction, the 4-point deduction, which, by the way, tomorrow on Wednesday is the day that their appeal is heard. So the timing of which making yourself a target, these blustery responses aren't good. And I also wonder, with how strongly this was worded, how hard the FA comes down. Now, listen, whether you talk about Marinakis, you talk about who actually has the account, what was said or who was told to publish this. And by the way, the response of Crystal Palace just hours later saying, Crystal Palace on Twitter, 5 extremely good goals, 2 goals conceded, which we simply have to accept. Hashtag CPFC will now enjoy their Sunday. I thought top bands. Well done.
Made the loss feel worth it, to be honest. God. It was so good.
It was so good. Yeah, listen, the Clattenburg thing was a head scratcher. Bringing him in to throw his weight around, which I don't listen. I know there's hundreds of thousands of pounds being placed in front of Mark Clattenburg. I know that he has his Daily Mail little article that he gets to write every single week. Yeah. But how does anybody take him seriously now?
The referee from Gladiators.
The referee from Gladiators, the referee that, where was he? Was he in Saudi Arabia or the Middle East?
Saudi,
when he got pushed out. Then when he was on television and he was trying to help out over here with NBC Sports. Then he's supposed to be the reference point and kind of the experienced ref that could actually help explain the laws of the game, the application to the game to the general public, and then being hired by Marinakis to be the voice and the face of basically. He can say, and it's actually brilliant, that he can say whatever he wants because he's Mark Clattenburg and he's not necessarily a Nottingham Forest employee, but yet he is. But how are you going to punish him? Because he's just a part of the figurehead, but he's not the one that's ultimately responsible. So you have effectively 3 different versions of responsibility in this tweet, notwithstanding Nuno's press conference. Who else was in there? There was another player who referenced how pissed
Nico Williams. Nico Williams.
Neco Williams. So he was involved as well. So now you have effectively five different versions of Nottingham Forest having a really strong pop at the referee, the VAR. Your, I mean, you talk about professionalism. You're questioning the professionalism of an elite referee at the highest level in England as well. Now, do I think mistakes were made? Absolutely. I think any of these three decisions, if the referee blows the whistle, underneath this clear and obvious mistake interpretation, I'm not sure if VAR intervenes on any of the three. Should he have? Absolutely has, at least on one occasion, the foul, which I thought was, and this isn't being an American homer, on Gio Reyna. Side note, Ashley Young, how reckless has he been this season with his defending? Whether it's straight red cards, second yellows, or costing Everton penalties, he is the most reckless defender and I probably shouldn't say that. He is the player that I've noticed that has been incredibly reckless for a team that's on the verge or in the conversation for relegation. Some of his challenges, I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you making these challenges? And he got away with two in particular. So, yeah, I feel for Nottingham Forest, but then when they come out the way they do, it's tough to justify feeling bad for them because it comes off as such extreme arrogance when you have these type of tweets that you're putting out. So, I mean, I guess maybe you're taking your manager out of the firing line, you're taking the players out of the firing line, and you're saying, okay, they're not going to get fined, they're not going to be suspended, the FA can't come after them, but FA has to come down really, really hard on them, right?
Yeah, has to. Listen, two other quick bits on this before we get to heroes and villains. The first thing is a question to you about something we speak about quite a lot, and you've mentioned this before about in commentary when the VAR is having a conversation. We are heading towards, but haven't got there quite yet, of hearing that conversation live. Yeah. Nottingham Forest, in their second double down statement on Tuesday, said there needs to be greater transparency, which is true, and they want the audio of the VAR discussions published. Now, this should already be public, and it should already be, sunlight is the best disinfectant and all that, right?
100%.
There's no question in my mind, which I'll get to in a second, of the integrity of the officials. I'd happily have a conversation about competence. But they have offered Dunny Forest the chance to listen to the audio privately of the three penalty claims. Now, I don't really get that.
Nope.
Because all it's going to do is feed into a conspiracy that Forest as a club are pushing publicly, and they could hear it wrapped up privately. But if you can't publish it publicly, then quite rightly, people will be like, well, hold on. How comes they can hear it, but we can't hear it? What are we missing here? And what's the benefit of not making all this immediately public?
I agree with you 100%. I don't know why you would allow, I mean, by allowing them just to hear it, what does that do? It's not going to calm them down.
No.
And by the way, they're already going to be hypercritical of the words that are being used in the process in which they got to the non-decision or the decision of we are not going to overturn it. So why wouldn't you just, I mean, you've done it before. So what, now we get this the song and the song and pony dance of Howard Webb coming out, sitting with Michael Owen and the yippee yah, he ho ho ho, great call. This is where we got to the. It's not gonna. There will be zero solution. There will be zero solution. So there needs to be a continued healthy debate in this situation because yes, we have the technology, but yes, we have the human error that's being utilized with the technology. And again, it's the application that is faulty. Everything else, the idea of VAR, 100% correct. It's the application of the way VAR is being utilized that is not lining up with the eyeball test. The eyeball markers are not making sense. How a player can kick through the back of a boot and not touch the ball, and VAR saying, well, there's not a clear and obvious mistake. What in the are you talking about? Sorry, Tim.
One final bit on this before heroes and villains, and I just want to say this because I think it's important actually that Jurgen Klopp did this maybe last season about a referee, and I got the raging ump about it. To allege corruption is such a big thing. I think it's such a big thing to allege corruption. Corruption is real. Corruption is damaging. Corruption is such an issue that we all have to deal with, be it from governance and government to the sports we like, to the jobs we're in, all of it. It's so important to root that out when possible. So to allege it, you've got to have receipts. You've got to have evidence. You've got to have something. Here's a payment from A to B that proves that C happened. Something like that. Might not be as basic as that, but I need something. For Nottingham Forest to allege corruption of Stuart Atwell, the VAR, I think is so beyond the line. And what amazes me about this is, well, the double down amazes me. I kind of will almost give a Twitter admin a let off 5 minutes after the full-time whistle. Not fully, but I tend to give people a little bit of time in that first hour because it's emotional, right? We all get into it. But what's wild to me is that they're thinking Stuart Atwell, who is a bloke like you and I, right? He's not Ronaldo. He's not a millionaire. Doesn't live in a palace somewhere. He is a man with a mortgage. He is a man with a normal life. He is a man that has to go to Tesco for his shopping on a Saturday, right? This is not someone who lives in some sort of gated ivory tower community who's so wealthy and so above it all, none of this matters. It's all fun and games. This guy with a mortgage, this guy who's got to put his kids through college, this guy who's got to have his car payments and all this sort of stuff. You're telling me, after 20 years of his career, building up to this moment, paying off his mortgage, paying for his wedding, saving for his kids' university, college, whatever, he's sitting there in the VAR room. And because he supports Luton Town, he's going to sit there and go, actually, you know what? Screw this. No penalty. No way I'm going to give it, because this other game involving two other teams had a controversial decision in it. There is no way, even if he was an Everton fan, he would not call this down the middle, because it's his fucking job.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tim. This is not like a fan thing and he's doing it for a bit of fun. It's not a Sunday league game. It's not like it's not important. It's his life and livelihood. There is no way anyone who does this for a job would do this because they supported one of the other teams. And one of the lines in the second statement was extraordinary to me. They said, quote, "It's clear PGMOL must amend its rule on allegiances to account for contextual rivalries in the league table, not just local rivalries." So already they have a rule where if you're from near Old Trafford, you're not the VAR in the Manchester derby because you might call it for United, not City, which is stupid anyway. It's really stupid because, again, it's their job and their mortgage and their life and livelihood. These guys aren't going to torpedo their career over a potential penalty. Ever. They're not going to do that. But in this very partisan sport, fine, I get it. You don't want to have that conversation come around, fine. But now you've got to talk about, oh, you support team A, teams B and C might be involved potentially in their league position come the end of the season, so you can't work in this game. What are you talking about? Dunny, there's no way, is there? Unless you can prove this, you cannot allege this.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I think you did a great job with Stuart Atwell in the explanation. We as broadcasters, and I know this it's a different angle, but we as broadcasters have been accused of bowing to our fandom as opposed to calling the game down the middle. Like for me as a player, anytime I do a Columbus game or anytime I do a Salt Lake game and I'm doing a national broadcast, I have to, in the back of my mind, always remember that there is somebody out there that thinks that I am calling the game in favor of either the Crew or Real Salt Lake when they are involved. Even to the point where former teammates have been like, "Oh, of course you're going to make that call," like busting my. I think. Sorry, Tim. Yeah. It's the one thing I talk about all the time. The professionalism in the moment is about the job at hand. Now, you could think by sitting back on maybe a Saturday and watching the game that you're going to root for the demise of Nottingham Forest. But in that moment, you're not thinking about the demise of Nottingham Forest. I would hope that you're just thinking about getting the game correct. But again, I think this is less about the teams involved. I think it's more about the way in which we are watching VAR, and whether it's transparent or not, we are watching the application of VAR, taking the literal words off the piece of paper and applying them to the referee model in which they're managing the 90 minutes. And then using the difference of what we see in Champions League football, what we see in World Cup football, what we see in Premier League football, the individual referee associations then deciding how they apply those rules. Right? Because what happens in Champions League football with clear and obvious mistake or intervention of a referee's decision is it looks and feels drastically different than what we see in Premier League football. So again, I think there needs to be a unilateral decision upon the not just the laws of the game, because that's what the laws of the game are, right? It's a unilateral decision that these are the laws of the game. This is IFAB. This is what we expect. But then when we're using VAR intervention, I think that should be unilateral as well, because far too often we're seeing just these little slight tweaks of what's a clear and obvious mistake. What did they say? With something maximum, something with the least interference or something like that.
Minimum interference, maximum benefit.
I too many times this year we've seen the exact opposite. That would be the problem for Howard Webb to try to verbalize with this apology tour that we've seen from day one this season.
I think it's fair to say he's not done a great job this year, Howard Webb. There hasn't been great improvement, and that's a big issue.
Maximum interference with minimum. What was it?
That's it. The exact opposite of what it should have been. Right, let's do our heroes and villains of the last week. Dunny, who's your hero of the last 7 days in football?
Pep Guardiola. My hero is Pep Guardiola. After the win against Chelsea, I loved the fact that he stepped up. It wasn't even a dais. He stepped on the sidelines with Gary Lineker and the BBC, and he, I think, had a very valuable, real, and honest conversation about the decision making to play that game that weekend, especially when Chelsea, Coventry City, and Manchester United didn't have a midweek game. There was no reason for them to play on Saturday. I understand the complexity and the ask of the television broadcasters and who they want to see and who they don't want to see, who they'd prefer on one day versus who they prefer on the other. But there was no reason whatsoever after them going 120 minutes and the disappointment and everything that transpired midweek with Champions League for them to play that day. It made no sense whatsoever. And I get the hilarity in having this continued conversation about substitution patterns and who plays and who doesn't play. And look at your bench and look at the sovereign wealth fund and all that stuff. The reality is, at the end of the day, to win that game against Chelsea, he had to put out the best possible squad. He was redlining players left and right. He took massive risk with who he decided to play versus who he decided not to bring on. The idea of experience versus lack of experience, all of those things are obviously a big conversation point. But listen, just common sense, pure common sense. Take away everything else around Manchester City. Common sense said they should have played the Sunday game as opposed to Saturday game. So good on Pep. He knew that he was going to take the brunt of the criticism, by stating his claim that City shouldn't have played. I agree with him.
Yeah. No, look, on that particular point, I do think it's the worst person in the room just made a really good point scenario, right? I don't agree with a lot of what Guardiola says. I don't agree with the way Man City go about their business. I don't agree with the ridiculous amount of resource they've got, the fact they can just buy Mateus Nunes and Calvin Phillips for what would be record fees for some clubs just to see if they're any good. Like they can do it just for a laugh, and they can never fail in the transfer market. And there is a valid point to say that, oh yeah, you had to drop Erling Haaland. Why don't you bring in this World Cup winner for his replacement? Or why don't you play Mateus Nunes? Or why don't you give Jeremy Docker a start, that £60 million winger you brought in? So, you know, on the one hand, if you don't want to play 2 games in a week, give us some of your players back. You won't qualify for the Champions League and we're not in this mess. But on the other hand, let's just give him 3 days. Let's make that.
Look at how long it took you to get to that agreement with him.
So at the start, it's the worst. It's the worst person, the worst messenger for that particular thing
Fair.
was right, I would suggest. So I do agree with that point, but it can be honest about that. There are some other things I'd like a bit more honesty on, but we'll get to that, I'm sure, 115 times over. For me, really briefly, my hero of the week, actually, and I know you won't like this, is West Ham United.
Mm.
I actually thought I went on Thursday, and they're not going to be in the Europa League next season, or maybe Conference League, which is a shame. And I spoke to David Moyes after the game, and look, I think he has done an incredible job in the macro. It's been great. What a great journey. Greatest time ever to support the club. It does feel like it's over. And everyone needs a refresh, maybe him included. The squad needs a big rebuild, and they can actually spend quite big in the next couple of years because of the Rice money and the 3-year cycle and this summer's Paqueta sale. So it's a club going in the right direction after what David Moyes has done to professionalize this ragtag nonsense club that it's been for like the 10 years previous. And on Thursday, though they lost to Bayer Leverkusen, the reasons they lost the game, we've spoken about loads of times. You know, they don't have a big enough squad. Moyes told me he wants a small squad, but you need 15, not 13 or 11. You know, they haven't just got a small squad. They've got a criminally too small squad. And all of Leverkusen's goals were scored by subs. That was not lost on me. But to go toe-to-toe with a great team like that first 45 minutes against Leverkusen was about as full of adrenaline as I've been watching a game for years. It was so great and so thrilling and so fun. Exactly what I would have wanted. They faded. They didn't win the game in the end. They couldn't turn to their bench and bring on Victor Boniface and was it Frimpong, the other one that came on and scored.
Who did they let go in January? Who did they let go in January?
They let their bench go, right? It's mismanagement.
Yeah.
And, it was all inevitable,
just
right?
Making sure. Yeah.
There's loads of negatives to it, and it felt inevitable. And to complain about not having enough players to bring on when you're the one that sold them and didn't bring people in, I get all that. But away from it, I have absolutely loved this 3 years. And you've only known me in these 3 years. Yeah. Usually it's not like this. It's a shame not to be in it, but it was fantastic.
It is, Rennie. It is. We still get glimpses of 2021, Rennie.
Yeah.
It's usually pregame. It's usually when the starting 11 comes out.
So my heroes of the week would be the West Ham players who played the first 45 minutes against Leverkusen. Dunny, who's your villain?
It's got to be Anthony. It has to be. I just hate the reaction. I hate the game. I hate the way they got through. I hate the season in particular. And listen, if you're Neil Mopai, and by the way, fantastic tweet.
Superb.
You have earned that reputation, and that's who you are, and that's fine. I got no problem with it. You're going to own the dark arts and the game within the game. No problem. But just focus on your football. This season for Anthony, there's been too many highs and too many lows. Well, there's been not enough highs and too many lows. And the way that this season has gone, you cost more than Paul Pogba. And the villain that Pogba had turned into because of the money associated with his name was outrageous. So I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I didn't like it because Coventry City deserved more. And even if it was over Haji Wright cupping his ears, even if it was as Eric Ten Hag saying he was provoked, you play for one of the biggest clubs on the planet. Yeah. Like, show us a little bit more. I wasn't a big fan. A big fan. Petulant.
My villain of the week is Gabriele Mirandi. Now, Gabriele Mirandi is the 21-year-old girlfriend of Endrick, who is about to sign for Real Madrid. And this week, Endrick was speaking on a podcast called Pod de Las alongside Gabriele Miranda, where they made some interesting revelations about a relationship contract in place between the two. And again, he's 17 and she's 21. The contract between the two is one of the most fucking psychotic things, sorry, Tim, I have ever read in my entire life. It's absolutely insane. And look, the reason it's in place is because he is about to become a very, very rich person. And I would assume that they want to confirm that the 21-year-old model he is with, Taylor's old as time, is genuine as opposed to some sort of, gold digger or whatever. I don't know these people, but it's happened before in football history.
Yeah.
But this contract is fucking nuts. Right. Sorry, Tim. So in the contract, they have an I love you clause where they have to say, I love you every day and at every possible opportunity. Never miss the opportunity to say, I love you. If you miss that opportunity, you are in breach of relationship contract. They also agree to never, ever have any form or kind of addiction. So I assume on the one hand, that means alcohol, drugs, and women. On the other hand, it means Pokemon and, I don't know, EA Sports FIFA, as it's called now, or like, I don't know, Pogs. I don't know what a 17-year-olds get addicted to. King, I guess. Sorry, Tim. But I mean, I don't know. Never have any form of addiction is insane. They also have agreed they are verboten from using other words. I don't have a list of the words that they're not allowed to use, but there are certain words they are banning each other from using. And also in the contract, again, this is according to him speaking in this podcast, they are banned from any type of drastic changes of action. So I assume that means like one day you're really happy, the next day you might be in a mood, like, humans. That's banned under the relationship contract. So look, I appreciate that you have to protect young people who are about to come into a lot of money. And there is, in this particular world, a lot of people who might get their hooks into an individual who at 17 is a wide-eyed, bushy-tailed young talent, and there's money to be taken off them in their life. So I get the reasons why you might need some sort of protection. And again, I don't know this guy or this girl. I don't know if it's real or not, but I do know this is insane, an insane thing to do, and you can't expect any human to react in this predictable a way in a relationship. That's not how relationships work. It's not how life works. I cannot believe that this is even a thing, that he's 17, doesn't know. Sorry, Tim, but he's happy for this to be public knowledge. Never do this. And certainly if you do it, don't make it public. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different world, man. It's a different world. The social media world is a different world that we're living in. You're right. I mean, growing up as kids, we could all make mistakes. We could all make decisions. We could all have regrets. We could all, hit that proverbial fork in the road and take a left and be like, uh-oh, I got to go back, hit that and go to the right. What are you supposed to say, man? This kid's a superstar. Did you see the touch that he had the other day where he nutmegged the guy twice on the first touch when he came back in the midfield? He's filthy. It's incredible. But you're right. It's the tale as old as time. I mean, I would assume, besides the idea of trying to protect him, whether that's his family and parents, his brothers, sisters, advisors, whoever, having watched certain Brazilian national team players in the past find themselves just completely undone. He's 17. The difference between now and when he's 20, the difference between he's 20 and 25, 25 and 30. Hopefully the relationship works out. But yeah, that is fucking wild. Sorry, Tim.
It's just so wild. Well, I wish them all the best. I really do. But a relationship contract is, I think they call that a red flag. Anyway, right. We are out of time on today's Week in the Tackle. Brian Dunseth is over there, MLS legend. I'm Tom Rennie. If you watch the show on YouTube or Spotify, you can listen as a podcast. If you listen as a podcast, giving the game away here, you can watch on YouTube or on Spotify. Tim Horsey produced the program. We're back next week.